we strive for this to be a safe space. We want people to feel comfortable sharing their story and their experiences. And so we definitely want to welcome people's thoughts and perspectives. And so we do ask that we strive to be mindful and respectful of others. And we also want to acknowledge that people are in different places in their understanding of digital mental health. And so we welcome any questions that people have about the space. All right. So another note I like to make here before the start of every drop-in and really the start of any mental health conversation, there are a lot of digital tools out there for mental health, and it's really up to the consumer or the client to determine what their needs and preferences are at the end of the day. So although we'll be featuring several tools today, just wanted to let you know that it's meant to provide sort of a flavor of what's out there, and just to keep in mind that again, there are a lot of other tools that can be useful in the space. These are just some of the ones that we've identified and wanted to share with everyone. So in honor of Black History Month, we'll be talking today about digital mental health resources for the Black community. Our goal here is to raise awareness around both the mental health needs of the community, as well as what unique challenges the community faces in the digital mental health space. And like I said earlier, we'll also be highlighting some resources that are available to the community. So next, I'd like to go over some of the key mental health issues that affect the Black community. I want to start by showing this flowchart from Mental Health America, or MHA. I really appreciate this flowchart because it helps provide context in terms of just the number of people that are in need of mental health services. This infographic is actually a few years old now. I think it was taken from around 2018 to 2019. And so these numbers are actually likely to be different, very possibly higher, especially given all that has happened in 2020 and in 2021 and even to this day, 2022. So I think the key number here to recognize is 7 million people, which is a large number of the population. Again, there's older information, but that's a big chunk of the population in the US of people who are facing mental health challenges. For added context, that is more than the populations of Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined, as noted here in the graphic. And here are some additional facts pulled from Mental Health America. Mental health in the Black community is more often tied to trauma and violence. Issues such as historical oppression, dehumanization, violence, and ongoing issues of systemic racism. These all result in layers of individual and community traumas, from personal experiences of discrimination to shared issues faced by the community. Examples there being police brutality, unequal access to healthcare, as has been highlighted by the COVID epidemic, and also in the realm of mental health. This has also led to challenges across generations. So distrust of systems, inadequate treatment of health issues, and again, tied in there is mental health issues as well. And then some specific mental health challenges faced by the community. Stigma is an ongoing challenge. So acknowledging mental health issues is a barrier, and seeking mental health treatment is also a sort of like a double-edged sword. So there oftentimes there is a barrier in terms of actually seeking treatment once even mental health issues are acknowledged. Not to mention, actually, I'll skip down to skip down below to access being a challenge, access to treatment. There's often not enough culturally competent care that's readily available. even if someone is able to overcome that barrier of stigma and being open to seeking mental health treatment. Access to care, again, mental health care facilities in communities of color is traditionally lacking, and just as an example. And also in the prison system, where Black and African American people are overrepresented, mental health care is often limited, and conditions are often exacerbated. So again, this just kind of shows you these different layers and how these different challenges kind of intertwine to really create this effective mental health challenge faced by the Black community. Okay, so now I want to shift gears a bit and begin to cover some of the digital tools that can be useful in supporting Black mental health. And so to kick us off with this conversation, I'd like to welcome Colette Ellis, who is a behavioral health coach specializing in working with communities of color, and also the founder of Libbie, which is a mental health chatbot. So welcome, Colette.
Thank you, John. It's so great to be here with everyone today, and I'm going to aim to share my screen. And yes, so I'm excited to share with you what we are working on at Libbie Health, building a chatbot and mental wellness companion. And so just to reiterate some of the issues that John has already shared with you, when I talk about mental health, particularly as it relates to women of color, right? I've never been a Duchess or an Olympian or Miss USA, rest in peace. And yet as a Black woman, I've definitely had lived experience dealing with different types of microaggressions and dealing with how that has impacted my own mental health, in addition to, as John mentioned, being a behavioral health coach and working with my clients around these issues. And so again, we know the problem, but just the fact that twice as many women overall get depression, and then for women of color, twice as likely to have hopelessness, but half as likely to seek treatment. And we know that there are few and far between for culturally competent providers. And so we look at behavioral tech health apps, and I loved when I saw what John's going to share in terms of other players in the market. And yet when we still look at it, it's still a very small percentage of apps that focus on mental health. So when I was thinking about what can I do to help solve this problem, that was what led me to want to build Libbie. And so Libbie is a culturally responsive chat and mental wellness companion. It is designed to support women of color and other marginalized leaders first, in that we are ensuring that the persona and the avatar is culturally responsive. When you engage in conversations with Libbie, we are asking about your pronouns. We are also asking about what issues are leading you to engage with Libbie, and we include in that aspects of what the user might consider to be hurtful incidents. So asking about, is it a microaggression? Is it something to do with racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia? So we're including that in the experience so that our users know that they can bring whatever is going on with them to Libbie, and Libbie will be there to support them. So we are definitely culturally competent in terms of our approach, and we're focusing specifically on somatic and mind-body healing, which I'll talk about in a moment, which we really feel is another way to support women and other marginalized leaders to address stress, anxiety, and trauma that gets internalized in the body, as well as how it impacts our minds. We're starting with this inclusive and intuitive design so that there are non-judgmental conversations. The user can bring whatever they bring, and Libbie is there, she has your back. And we are starting with a freemium model to get people to understand what EFT tapping is, which is at the foundation of the Libbie chatbot. So if you're not familiar with it already, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, or tapping. And basically you are tapping on acupoints So if you've ever had acupuncture, some of the points may seem familiar to you. And so when you share, say, for example, here on the screen, it says when the user says that they are dealing with anxiety, Libbie encourages them to tap on the under eye point and say that they're tapping to release anxiety. So it is actually a mind-body approach. And in a 5.5-year study, it was shown that EFT tapping was actually 30% more effective than CBT for helping to relieve anxiety. So we include EFT tapping in the conversations. We also have some breath work that are in the conversations, and that is definitely a component that we're looking to build more into it. Again, leading with this mind-body healing as an approach to support our users. So we know we have a large market in which to scale, and 67 million women of color in 2019, which is 20% of the population, and expected to reach half of all women by the year 2050. And we are targeting those women of color initially between the ages of 25 to 44 who are proactively seeking support for their mental health and well-being, and or are referred by coaches, therapists, or EFT tapping practitioners like myself. And so far we've had great success. We have our first prototype that we launched last year, and we had folks signing up for the beta test, and we know that they're using it to help relieve anxiety. We know that they are interested in still receiving support from diverse practitioners. So Libbie is not designed to replace coaches, tapping practitioners, or therapists. It's really, I like to think of it as in the moment, right? So you wake up in the middle of the night and you have stress or anxiety, or you get off a Zoom call that just sort of triggered you for one reason or another. Libbie is there to have your back. And we are definitely getting that feedback that users are appreciate the approach and the support and the guidance that Libbie provides. We want to support users in their self-care. So we've included reminders so that this actually gets to be part of their self-care routine, so that they can use Libbie in addition to that. Yeah, and so there are definitely studies on the evidence for EFT as being helpful for reducing anxiety, for depression, for PTSD. And there are definitely research out there, so I can share those links if that's of interest. I think in terms of for BIPOC communities, it really is about the benefits of mind-body healing in general. Like I like to say, you know, you can't think your way out of racism. You can't really think your way out of a microaggression. And so it's really about helping to support users to release internalized stress and anxiety when we start to make that about ourselves, right? So when that sort of feeling of less than, or those feelings of worthlessness and those feelings of hopelessness often are things that we internalize from others. And so mind-body healing is really effective at helping to release it, not just from your mind, but those traumas that can be stored in the body. Like if you've ever had the experience, I always say, like, where you think you're over something and then all of a sudden a smell triggers you or a comment triggers you, right? It's because that source of stress or emotional trauma can still be linked in your tissues. And just to close out in terms of who's been helping to build this. So I mentioned I'm a behavioral health coach. I've worked at COM, and I've had two great conversation designers, Natalie and Nick, who have been phenomenal in helping to bring this solution to market. So I'm excited to share this with you, and I'll share in the chat also, we are looking for users to apply for our next 3-week free trial to be able to interact with Libbie so that we can continue to get more feedback and be able to support more women of color in their mental wellness journey. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colette, for sharing your work on Libbie. So moving on to some additional tools, and again, a big thank you to Colette for kicking us off here and sharing her work with Libbie. We'd like to share some additional resources which we've found at One Mind PsyberGuide and which we've reviewed, as well as some that are sort of on our radar and things that we wanted to call out, especially given sort of that lack of technology and resource in this space. So the first app we'd like to recognize is Liberate Meditation. Liberate Meditation is an app designed to teach meditation exercises to people in the Black community. Meditation sessions are delivered through the app by teachers who represent specific communities within the Black community. So those who are maybe, say, of the LGBTQ plus community as well. There's some teachers who cover pretty much a wide range of sub-communities within the app. And some of the unique topics for meditation include microaggressions, race and pride, and sort of how these different subtopics can be a part of one's experience and incorporating that into these meditation exercises. The next app is the Safe Place. The Safe Place is a psychoeducational app that aims to provide education on different mental illnesses such as postpartum depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and more. Again, it's geared specifically towards the Black community, providing education about mental health and mental illnesses that they may be more vulnerable to than other folks. Next is Shine. Shine is a self-care app and a meditation app that uses a sort of instant messaging kind of platform to interact with its users. And one of the core features with Shine is sort of the journal aspect of it. Again, geared more towards self-care and preventative mental wellness. And also there's a bit of a community feel to it where you can kind of interact with some other Shine users. Ayana is an app which aims to assist users from marginalized communities in finding a therapist who share a similar background and who share that understanding of the user's community. So one of the challenges we talked about earlier was accessing culturally appropriate care. This app is one of a few apps actually that aim to bridge that gap and sort of address that challenge. And a few other digital tools that are out there. Exhale, which is a newer app that crossed my radar, it's an app that again aims to improve emotional well-being, specifically for Black, Indigenous women of color. This app includes guided meditation, coaching talks, daily affirmations, and those range from 9 to 16 minutes. And they cover topics like microaggressions, stress reduction, soul medicine, and a few others. And this one is, I believe, available both on iOS and Android, but yeah, definitely worth checking out. Hurdle is another app similar to Asana, which provides or seeks to provide culturally intentional therapy, and by providing or by linking folks to providers who are culturally humble and provide evidence-based care. Therapy for Black girls is they are mainly a website actually, which provides resources for Black women who, again, are seeking mental health care. They have an app which ties directly to that website. The app itself provides linkage to peer support, along with a few other mental health tools, such as workshops, yoga, meditation sessions, affirmation tracks, and journaling exercises as well. And then a few other online resources and tools that we thought would be great to call out. We have BEAM, Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, which is a collective of advocates, yoga teachers, artists, therapists, lawyers, religious leaders, teachers, basically a collection of folks who are committed to mental health support for the Black community. There's Melanin and Mental Health, which also seeks to connect individuals with culturally competent clinicians. Health in Her Hue, again, very similar. I would actually compare this similar to Therapy for Black Girls. It seeks to connect folks to different providers, as well as provide some tools and community for folks to connect to. MindRight is it's a culturally competent or culturally responsive daily coaching via text message service. And this is meant for people who want to, again, seek some support anonymously and in a culturally responsive manner. And similarly, there are a few other apps that provide this sort of peer support. I think we've covered a few out there in the past. One is for California residents, CalHope Connect. That's another one that provides similar kind of peer support service here. And finally, the last is a podcast, which I highly recommend checking out. It's the Unapologetically Black Unicorns podcast. This is hosted by Kira Smyrick. She's a mental wellness advocate who, in this podcast, she chats with folks who are really advancing the intersection of mental health and racial justice. Highly recommend checking that out, and she has some really interesting conversations there in that podcast. Again, we hope to see you at our next drop-in and continue these conversations around digital mental health. Thank you, folks.